everyone, and thank you for listening to this episode of the Campus Safety Voices podcast, which will focus on behavioral threat assessments in K-12 schools. My name is Amy Rock, and I'm Campus Safety's executive editor. Today, so much focus is placed on schools' response to shootings or other types of violence. Stakeholders want to know, do they have a plan in place to respond to these incidents? This is obviously important because schools want to protect their students and staff, and they also don't want the litigation that we've seen come with being ill-prepared. However, prevention should truly be at the forefront of a school safety plan. There's also a lot of focus on hardening a school and keeping out the outsider threat when the majority of threats are from those who are allowed in schools in the first place. And that's where behavioral threat assessments can come into play. In today's episode, you'll hear my interview with two people, the first being Lou Robinson, a 28-year veteran of the U.S. Secret Service, who has performed and supervised behavioral threat assessment investigations directed towards Secret Service protectees. Lou has also worked with school districts to deliver presentations focused on behavioral threat assessment and targeted violence prevention. The second guest is Kirk Cerny, COO of Secure Passage. Following a 25-year career in higher education, Kirk now dedicates his professional energy on the convergence of digital and physical security for enhanced common operations and threat mitigation. Here's our chat. Today, we are going to discuss the importance of school behavioral threat assessments, and we'll kick off the discussion with Lou. Now, in your long career, you've specialized in behavioral threats. How have you seen the school threat landscape, change over the years of that work?
Well, Amy, I would say thanks for having the interview today and meeting with Kirk and I to talk about this very important topic. The landscape has changed, in my opinion, as a reflection of society today. As society has changed and the different stressors and factors that we see impacting both our school students and adults in society, that carries over into the school violence as well. So we look at those factors. Some of it could be trust and respect. We've really lost trust and respect in each other, trust and respect in our institutions, whether it be governmental, schools, and so forth, and that it impacts, you see that associated in society. The other issue is mental health and developmental issues. A significant uptick in mental health and emotional and developmental issues in the last several years, especially coming out of COVID and even really pre-COVID in the schools, having to deal with those issues. And again, another reflection of society as a whole. Negative home life factors. As again, these things that impact the home life come to school. So whether it's a substance abuse in the home, mental health issues in the home, fiscal issues in the home, all those stressors impact the students, and they bring that within the school. Social media, what can I say? Social media and has its certain positive impacts in society, but the negative impacts for kids that are constantly on social media and seeing bombarded with the TikTok challenges and bullying on social media and Instagram trying to outdo one another and these different crazy contests and different things that are going on, or the videos that are made and the next person wants to have their 15 minutes of fame. Maybe it's a violent incident, maybe it's not, but again, the impact of social media on the kids and wanting to be influencers, a positive and negative impact of that. And obviously, the social stressors associated with all that, going back to that trust and respect. If I don't have a positive relationship in the home with my family, positive relationship in the community with my peers, positive after school events, I'm not involved in band, I'm not involved in my church youth group, I'm not involved in, a sporting team, I'm not involved in scouting, something that gives me a positive outlet. And just all those stressors coming together and just that lack of positive relationships tied in with all these other things, that stress comes together and the kids are at school, 8 hours out of the day. And where's a lot of that violence going to happen? It's going to be on the school bus. It's going to be at school, on the way home, at the bus stops. It just gonna, I shouldn't say explode at that point, probably the wrong, set of words, but that's where you're going to see, the violence. It comes to school.
And now I also wanted to ask, using your background as a roadmap, can you share a scenario that highlights the importance of identifying concerning or prohibitive behaviors and initiating the intervention process?
Sure. And I give this scenario quite a bit. And if I do presentations on behavioral threat assessment in schools, and I've used this through the years, and And I think it highlights the importance of that, of identifying warning signs, your red flags, and that intervention. So I like to use a scenario. I'm a freshman in high school. I'm involved in scouting. I'm involved in my church youth group. I have a lot of friends, positive relationship with friends, doing really well in school the first half of school. Second half of school, my behavior changes. Something's going on. I'm irritable. I'm not participating in class. I'm lashing out at others. In scouting, maybe I'm not attending the meetings, not attending youth group, and there's other things that some behavioral flags that are raised that my friends, what's going on there, or my teachers and things. So as a school year progresses, my grades are going down, but now it's March. I'm a kid that loves to play baseball, and I try out for the baseball team, and I get cut from the baseball team. Now, my focus now goes to my gym teacher, who's the baseball coach. So all the source of my problems are now the baseball coach because he cut me. I start fixating on the baseball team, baseball coach. I'm going to get that guy for cutting me. But what they don't know in the background is, because we didn't pick up on those red flags, is I'm having some of those stressors at home that I mentioned. My parents are getting divorced. There's fiscal issues in the family, and it's impacting me. And I don't know how to handle that stress. So now I fixate on the baseball coach, because if that baseball coach hadn't cut me and I was able to make that baseball team, well, that would have saved my parents' marriage, because they could come watch me play baseball and cheer me on and enjoy and get back together as a family and have some good times together. But since he hadn't, done that, he cut me. Now I'm focused on him. So now I'm drawing schematics, little doodles on the side of the paper, with guns or explosives or different things, and I'm posting things on social media. I'm showing an interest in violent events. Things that are just red flags, and you know, things that if you use that community systems approach, I talked about scouting in school and the church youth group. There's things that are there in my behavior that have changed, but nobody says anything. Nobody picked up on that. Okay, but if they had picked up, that I'm doing this, and my peers in my class see my notebook, and again, my grades are going down. Nobody put together, like, what is going on? What's happening in his life that's caused this? A good kid, and now something's happened. Okay. So some of those red flags, having a behavioral threat assessment team, management team in place in the school, picks up on those red flags, having a bystander reporting system in place, picks up on those red flags, people report it, and we get that intervention going to get me off of that pathway, that highway to violence. I like to use another analogy, that I'm on that highway to violence, but there's plenty of off ramps, exits to get me off of that path of targeted violence. So I'm not attacking the school. I'm not going after my gym teacher. I'm not going after the other baseball players on the team. You're able to get me off of that highway of violence, use that exit ramp, get me the help that I need. Maybe just some counseling just to help deal with that stressor of my parents being divorced and going through that separation and divorce. Again, coming back to that mental health, student wellness, and just a good quality behavioral threat assessment would have identified and picked up on those things and got me the help that I needed.
I know we're here to talk about behavioral threat assessments, but there isn't just one thing that can be implemented to prevent or mitigate violence. So what are some additional processes, systems, or programs schools should have in place to mitigate potential threats?
Yeah, certainly the best practice, certainly be to establish a behavioral threat assessment management team that handles a school district, or maybe they're going to be specific to school, maybe an overall school district team, and then a team at each school. But to establish that behavioral threat assessment management team, and develop policies and procedures, and someone's going to lead that team, and training, everything, and make that a quality, robust team. And the other thing, again, with that bystander reporting, having a reporting system in place. Some states have a state level mandate, others do not. It could be school districts choose what system they want to use and so forth. But again, having that so that I can make that anonymous report or a confidential report and get that process going. We talked intervention in the last question to get that going. The other thing is what I say in the beginning, trust and respect. Schools have to build a culture of trust and respect, in their schools, so that kids feel comfortable coming to teachers, talking to the bus driver, talking to the janitor, the maintenance staff, even maybe their guidance counselors, just having some trusted relationship within the school to know that if I come forward and say something about a peer that I'm concerned about, that they're going to take it seriously, and they're going to act upon it. And when they act upon it, you know, I don't want to come forward if they're going to say that, you know, Lou Robinson just said that he saw Joe Smith doing something. You know, we keep it confidential, and you continue to do that and build that trust through it. So I'm not, you know, building up a fear to report, if you will, so we can go through and then begin and again make that positive influence on these kids, so that you know, they are willing to come forward and be, because school safety really, it's everybody in that community, the school, you know, the students, the staff, administrators, so forth, and all the community stakeholders involved in school safety. It takes, you know, that whole group to keep the school safe. So in a nutshell, it'd be those three things that I just mentioned: establish a team, have a reporting system, and truly a strong, robust culture that you know, builds a strong relationship with the kids and trust in reporting. It could be the invisible ones, you could say. You know, who thinks of the maintenance staff at the school?
Mm-hmm.
They're going to see and hear a lot of things from kids, because they don't think, you know, that they're listening, or, oh, it's just Mr. Jones, the, you know, the maintenance engineer, or school bus drivers, right? Um, you know, all the stuff that goes on in a school bus, you know, good and bad. Well, that school bus driver knows all that stuff. They hear these things. So it's also, you know, getting those folks could be a part of your behavioral threat assessment management team, you know, and that multidisciplinary team. So it, again, taking a look at what you need, making a good sound team put together, made up of those individuals.
Yeah, as many eyes and ears as possible, for sure.
Exactly.
And now you mentioned behavioral threat assessment teams, and there obviously are schools that have these teams and certain procedures in place, but might not be utilizing them properly. The biggest, most recent example we can think of is Oxford High School, where they had a process, but they didn't follow it. And there was also a lot of confusion as to who would spearhead the threat assessment team. Are there any common errors you've seen being made regarding behavioral threat assessments, whether that be through policy, execution, recovery, et cetera?
Yeah, you have to train. You know, I'll use the analogy again. I'm a baseball guy, you know, played baseball in college. So everything I do comes back to baseball, where it's a scenario analogy I'm using. So in this case, you know, the catcher knows what the first baseman's going to do in this play. Same with the second baseman, shortstop, third base, pitcher. We all know what we're supposed to do. I know my individual role. I know what your role is. It's the same with this multidisciplinary, you know, threat assessment team. We have to know what each other's role is, understand our piece of it, but understand also what my partners, my teammates are doing. So that's why it's very important as a training piece. You know, they should meet monthly, go over things. If there's no cases to review, they could use, you know, scenarios like we used earlier, and walk through that as a training exercise, just so that they're good, you know, understand what each other's doing in that process, so that they do have a quality team in place that can address these. And again, that early intervention, get me off of that path of violence.
And now that brings us to potential solutions that are available to aid schools in addressing behavioral threats, including those offered by Secure Passage. So I'll switch over to you, Kirk. Can you just give a brief history and overview of the company and what you guys do?
Yep. Thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to be with you today. First of all, we're not new to the business of security. Our organizations span back 30 years in digital security as well as physical security. And we got our start in physical security as it relates to behavior in the late 90s, early 2000s, working on projects that would assist our customers in the federal government understand who might be likely to attack or be a threat to that agency, that organization, or the people, places, and things that they have. And so we began that journey. We're insider threat specialists, which all ties into behavior and how behavior is addressed from a security perspective. We embody the principle at Secure Passage that it's all security to us, meaning that there's digital security, there's physical security. All of it needs to be converged or blended in order to give the best picture possible for understanding a threat, and mostly for safeguarding or raising the security posture of your organization. Our core mission is really designed to be meticulous about the identification, organization, and prioritization of the key digital and physical data that an organization needs to understand, visualize, and be safe about. When it comes to behavioral threat, certainly having a platform in place to be able to capture the data, manage the cases, understand and inform all stakeholders is something that we're passionate about. And we've built that foundation of a platform on the decades of experience that we have in digital security and physical security, but also law enforcement, behavioral science, critical infrastructure, and education. Personally, I've got 25 years of experience in the education space. So understanding how all of those pieces come together in order to provide an ecosystem that is, first of all, understanding the threat that's in their environment, as well as then the ability to, as Lou mentioned, mitigate on a pathway to violence somewhere along the way, stepping in front of the individual and turning them around. By the way, behavioral threat isn't about turning people in. It's about understanding the problem and turning them around. That's the approach certainly that we take. From a platform perspective for behavioral threat, more than a decade ago, we're not new to this. We started looking for a solution and then building ultimately a solution managing campus risk. In-depth discussions with district leaders, school administrators, security professionals, et cetera, district police chiefs, certainly counselors, school psychologists, et cetera, teachers and operations staff. We built a platform to support education and the various needs that security remits have, but also something that takes the input of all of those different parties and blends them together. So as Lou was mentioning earlier, having a behavioral threat management team really comes from the foundation of work that we've put into our platform. We developed as Secure Passage the first behavioral threat assessment application of our own in 2018, and it was for a large school district in Northern Virginia, where they were using the application really to identify, assess, manage behavioral threats as they exist of all types, and then put it into a secure repository of data that is supporting records, giving staff and administrators the ability to see open and closed cases, and certainly in a role-based, access-controlled, not available to the internet type of solution that is a security-first posture for behavioral threat assessment. We use a variety of frameworks, but we lean toward the INTAC model with the National Threat Assessment Center from the Secret Service, as well as the Virginia model, which is the Virginia accepted model from their criminal justice department. The model is not as important at a baseline for what a district is using, but moreover to understand the way that they want to manage a behavioral threat program. But if they don't currently have a framework in place that is authored and orchestrated by a state or by a district, we come with those frameworks, particularly INTAC and the Virginia model. And then beyond that, we are able to also bring in the assessment pieces that might be bespoke within a district or a state. So if there are requirements that need to be managed from that behavioral perspective, and oftentimes, Lou, as you know, it flows over into the physical security piece and it flows over into other elements of the educational ecosystem. We're able to capture those kinds of assessment pieces that might be driven by the district or the state as well. So very comprehensive, but certainly a way to surgically take the evidence that might be growing for behavioral threat around an identity, one student or one staff member, or even third parties. We need to understand, the threat that they might bring to the school as well. All of that can be captured within the Secure Passage platform for behavioral threat assessment, and then give you the insight that you need as an organization to make good and solid decisions. Again, in this case, to get in front of that potential problem, understand it, from a clinical perspective, but also from just a human and behavioral perspective to turn that individual around and have positive outcomes with a behavioral threat management program.
Now, secure passage, as you said, has been in the industry for decades. What are you finding your school behavioral threat assessment solution? What do you think makes it unique from similar solutions?
Well, number one, the ability to customize the threat assessment based upon the needs or the requirements of the jurisdiction, but then also the underpinnings of having professionals like Lou, for example, that have utilized the frameworks in a variety of settings, including educational settings, K through 12, higher education, et cetera, and have conclusively mitigated threats based upon that framework. What we do find is that there's a national conversation now about mental wellness in education. This is something that, certainly professionals have talked about for a very long time. You go to the website of the National School Psychologists Association, they have, deep and wide material on behavioral threat. But it is just now really entering the public discourse. We have presidential candidates in this election cycle who are actually talking about mental wellness as it relates to education. This is a piece of the security puzzle that we know has been very important for a very long time, but districts and states are taking it more seriously now because of the uptick in, as Lou mentioned, kind of the antisocial behavior that has come from the conditions in which we live today, whether it's a rather chaotic society or an antisocial society coming out of lockdowns where we like to say what a habit is established in 30 days and then it's really pinned down after 60 and it becomes part of your life after 90. Well, for 18 months to 2 years, people were locked in their homes and relatively antisocial by comparison to their normal pattern. So this invites antisocial behavior, and as people returned to school, we saw the uptick in fights, bullying, other kinds of events. We also have seen an uptick in school-related violence as it relates to sharp objects and guns. The other thing that we find with practitioners that we're working with in the education space and corporate space as well, interestingly, this problem is societal. It's not just K through 12 or on campus or in hospitals, et cetera, but it's a nationwide, it is a societal issue. The practitioners, because they're busy people, and oftentimes there might be multiple cases that they're looking into, they need an ability to walk through step by step some of these guidelines. The INTACT guideline, for example, Lou, I think that's somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 pages. The Virginia guidelines are upwards of 90 or 100 pages of material to ingest and then operationalize. We help users by allowing them, first of all, to have a place for cases, to open a case, to review and validate incoming reports and that sort of thing. But then, have a place, a source of truth for that information to reside that allows them then to determine a response or intervention if necessary, implement the chosen response, and then, understand how the case is progressing. And if this is something that is substantive and we really need to intervene, or if it's something that's more transient, someone in a hallway saying, I don't like you, and next time I see you, I'm going to punch you in the face. Well, that kind of thing is very transitive or transient versus something that's substantive, like I am going to come to school, not only punch him in the face, but I'm going to stab him. So those kinds of things, are taken into account as well, so that the practitioners can analyze those records, make sure that the processes for intervention are well followed. Even for busy professionals who've done this a million times, it's important to follow the steps, kind of like a pilot in a cockpit. It doesn't matter how many times you've taken off and landed successfully. Hopefully your ratio is exactly 1-to-1. But then in addition, you have a pre-flight checklist that you go over. Doesn't matter how many hours you have under your belt. This helps professionals analyze case records and then submit those reports to stakeholders as necessary, so that information is being shared to the appropriate parties at the appropriate time to get in front of something that could potentially trend toward violence.
Yeah, absolutely. And now I wanted to ask a few questions that Lou, Kirk, either of you or both of you are invited to answer. A lot of topics we cover on campus safety can be heavy and disheartening, and I imagine you guys feel that sometimes. And I would like to end our chat today with some hopeful thoughts or takeaways for the future of student and school safety. Do either of you see hope on the horizon for how schools are addressing increased violence?
And my response, Amy, is 5 minutes before we joined this video recording, I was on with the governor's office, and they were talking about within their state the ability or the need to bring together the insights from their Department of Education, a university-based school safety center, the governor's office, and emergency management, et cetera, tying all of this together such that they can get to a kind of a crawl, walk, and then run posture with their security within the state for their schools. So the positive that I see right now is longitudinally in education. We've had groups of schools, administrators, et cetera, trying to do the very best that they can with the resources that they've got to enhance the security of their school for their students, faculty, staff, and visitors. But then now there are formal programs that are bringing together physical threat assessments, potentially behavioral threat assessments, other kinds of assessments where this is being addressed in a more as I mentioned, formal way, but in a stair-step way that the posture is always getting better and better from a security perspective. This is something that, in cybersecurity for the past 20 years, companies and organizations, governments, everybody's being hacked all the time. We put controls or layered security, if you will, in place to enhance that step by step. But on the behavioral side, as I mentioned earlier, we're just now getting around to, at least as a national effort or a national conversation, to address it. That being said, there are some school districts in America that have been conducting behavioral threat assessments and have had very successful behavioral threat management teams for a very long time, for decades in some cases. So good progress has been made, but certainly those that have programs in place, they are being asked by their colleagues in school safety, how did you do it? How do you actually operationalize it once you understand a framework you want to follow, et cetera? And moreover, how do we make this, from a state perspective, available to the biggest city that's in our jurisdiction or in our footprint, all the way to the rural school that may not have similar issues day to day, but do have some commonalities and need to be supported. So it is one of those situations where, from a positive perspective, we're making progress against behavioral threat. It is expanding rapidly. People need to know what to do, and we can certainly help them with that flow, with that process, based upon our decades of experience in that behavioral space. The biggest challenge is just the volume of events and data that is coming across. You're not only talking about multiple cases that you might be tracking, but each one of those cases has multiple sets of data that allow you to glean deeper insights on the trends that are happening with that individual, a shift in behavioral pattern, for example. This is something that practitioners have a hard time getting ahead of. And having a formal program in place, number one, with a behavioral threat management team, as Lou mentioned, as well as then a tool that resides as your source of truth, gives an organization a significant advantage in staying in front of multiple cases and multiple threats coming potentially from multiple different sources at any given time.
I spoke to a campus safety reader who's a practitioner. He was a security director at a K-12 school a couple years ago, and he was saying how he literally gets the anonymous tip sent to his phone, and it's a person just can't be expected. He works 24/7 basically because his phone rings that a kid submitted an anonymous report at 3 a.m. because someone was scrolling on social media and saw it. And that's where technology can help those practitioners who are so already overwhelmed kind of not have to do that 24-hour a day job.
Exactly. It is something, the more you can have a human-led, machine-driven solution, the better you're going to be. And I say human-led because humans are always part of the process. You can't automate everything, but automating multiple indicators of potential threat, bringing those together so an administrator, an analyst, a school resource officer can immediately access that different information that's been collated and presented within the secure passage platform, for example, is a huge advantage. You leveraging technology to bring together that information more quickly, because they obviously they say that seconds count, right? So it's important even in your day-to-day ecosystem to be drawing together the potential indicators of threat as quickly as you can to reduce the time to detection of that threat, to reduce the time to mitigation and response of that threat.
You had also mentioned in your answer schools working with resources that they have, which brings me to my next question. What advice do you guys have for schools or districts that might be struggling with their threat assessments due to a lack of resources? We know there's not enough mental health care providers, there's not enough social workers in schools. What advice do you have for schools struggling a little bit?
I'll take the first pass. I actually served on a committee in a state where we made grants for school safety from the Department of Homeland Security. And in as much we saw availability of millions of dollars each year out of the state that schools could apply for in a grant allocation. This kind of solution would meet the requirements of a security product or a security enhancement to which those kinds of funds could be made available. The states have been, as you read in Campus Safety Magazine, making significant investments in school safety. So the state itself can be a resource. There's potentially a question of haves and have-nots. If your district has a grant writer, oftentimes you can access more funds, both state and federal funds, for school safety. It's important for the administrators to look for those resources that are available from the state. Those may come from the Department of Education, from Emergency Management or Department of Homeland Security within the state. They can also certainly come from other kinds of organizations or groups, like the State Association of School Boards, school board members, as well as superintendents, as well as you go along the chain of administration in schools. They are very focused on behavioral threat at the moment, mental wellness of the students. So this is an important thing, to understand that those groups may be also funding or seeking sources of funding for those types of behavioral programs. Lou, did I steal your thunder, sir?
Well, maybe just a wee bit, but I'll piggyback on what you said, because you focused on the fiscal resources and how to do that. So, I'll look at the human resources, for a district. So as Kirk mentioned, a smaller rural district, maybe they're going to partner up with their neighboring school district, and they're going to have a joint behavioral threat assessment team and pool their resources together to cover both. Maybe they're going to leverage human resources from the county level, mental health professionals, or the state level mental health professionals, taking advantage of the tools that are already out there, the organizations that are already out there, to be a part of your team, that helps you accomplish that mission. And like Kirk said, there's the grant writing process and the grants that are out there, but there is also, thinking outside the box, if you will, bringing in those human resources from others. You have to be efficient with your resources, and nobody has unlimited resources, both human resources and fiscal. And how can we be effective by, mutually helping each other address this situation in our school districts and our communities. Maybe local law enforcement has developed a threat assessment program and looking at these things, in their community, leveraging, the county mental health professionals, other law enforcement agencies in the area, coming together, making a behavioral threat assessment team for the county or the city. Well, maybe the school district becomes a part of that team, and that team looks at issues within the school district.
One final question to close out our discussion today. If listeners could go do one thing after listening to this podcast that would make a difference or help their school or district better handle or address behavioral threat assessments, what would that be?
I'll bet lead off on this one, Kirk. I would say it ties back to, the common theme through what we've talked about here is if you've not established a behavioral threat assessment management team, please do so as soon as you can. As a part of that, as we mentioned, through your developing, policies and procedures, how your team's going to operate, that multidisciplinary threat assessment team, identifying a leader, identifying, a training process for the people that are on your team to work together, and then identifying a tool like Secure Passage provides that's available to help that team be successful in their mission. Again, taking a look at everything and putting it together, and this tool helps them accomplish that.
Yeah, that's a beautiful answer. And being formal and being deliberate about the process is key. And certainly as we visit with superintendents and school board members and even governors, they're tuned in now, I believe, to solidifying a formal process. And that is necessary in order for all of this to work. So it ties in very much with what Lou said. But those are the voices from the field today who are saying, yep, it's time. And indeed, as a national conversation, I believe we're there. It's time. And as it relates to those of us that have spent time in education and working with our students, faculty, staff, and our third parties that visit our schools, this is one of the greatest challenges that we know we've faced, throughout our history. Behavioral threat also, helps with the potential turnaround of suicidal ideation and other kinds of things that we face in education. It has multiple needs to support the mental wellness of our people that we have within our ecosystem. So thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about it today. And indeed, a formal program would be the first best step.